Tihe mauri ora. Kia ora. Just a brief explanation. Taonga tuku iho references tangible treasures that are handed down through the generations. Kōrero tuku iho references narrative, storytelling, whakapapa, pūrākau that is handed down through the generations. Ne? Ka pai. The whakapapa of Niho Taniwha is grounded in the deeper cosmology and knowledge systems of te ao Māori, where understanding comes through relationships, ne? Between people, between whenua, and the unseen forces that shape our forever changing world. In this sense, Niho Taniwha isn't simply a framework or a tool. It sits within a lineage of knowledge that connects ancestral wisdom with contemporary practices. So across Aotearoa and the wider Pacific, there exists a rich history of narratives that speak to Taniwha. Within te ao Māori, Taniwha are understood as guardians of place. They dwell within the clouds, rivers, lakes, coastlines and valleys, watching over the well-being of the land and the people who belong to it. These environments, land, air and sea, are themselves complex systems, layered with knowledge and meaning. In this way, Taniwha are not only protectors of place, but also guardians of knowledge held within those environments. Within our kōrero tuku iho, Taniwha are also navigators and teachers. Much like Poko Poko Whititera depicted on the right, Taniwha guide communities through moments of uncertainty, warnings of danger, and helping people move safely through complex environments. Their presence reminds us that knowledge is not static. It is something we observe, learn from, and carry forward in our relationships with the world around us. It is from this understanding that the philosophy of Taniwha guides the work of Niho Taniwha. The Niho, or teeth, symbolize strength, resilience, and the ability to hold the line when facing difficult conditions. In the context of systems change, or systems return, these teeth represent the courage required to confront complex and sometimes oppressive structures that impact whānau and communities. Just as the Taniwha stands firm within the currents of a river, the work of Niho Taniwha calls us to remain grounded and steadfast while navigating the currents of systems and institutions. And at the same time, the Taniwha reminds us that guardianship is deeply relational. Similar to te pura and pori pori, depicted on the left, it requires attentiveness to the environment, to the stories and experiences of people, and to the patterns that shape our collective future. So in practice, this means listening deeply to communities, learning from lived experiences, and allowing those insights to guide how systems evolve. And through this lens, Niho Taniwha, again meaning the teeth of the Taniwha, becomes a way of working that is both protective and transformative. The symbols within Niho Taniwha carry deep connections to learning, knowledge, and whakapapa. They remind us that the work of understanding and transforming systems is inseparable from the histories, relationships, and wisdom that shaped them. So, in this way, whakapapa of Niho Taniwha is not only about where the framework comes from, but it is also about the responsibility we carry when we step into this mahi. To walk alongside the Taniwha is to accept the role of a guardian, a navigator, a learner, ensuring that the knowledge we gather from the ground continues to shape the systems that serve our people and the generations to come.
Thank you for sharing that deep mātauranga about Taniwha, Eruini. I'd like to take some time to share some reflections of Niho Taniwha through an Indigenous-led system change perspective. Taniwha, as we've heard, are guardians of local ecologies and knowledge, and therefore guardians of complex and hyper-localised knowledge systems. Similarly, we've come to think of Niho Taniwha here at the lab as a guardian of knowledge which centres the mana of whānau to drive systems change. You can go to the next one, thanks, Ricky Lee. We've come to think of Niho Taniwha as a system in its own right, and it's most obvious through its 3D representation. Through its many levels and spaces, And it's through these multiple levels and spaces that knowledge is able to move dynamically. And it's this multidimensional nature, I believe, that enables Niho Taniwha to hold complexity. This includes the power of whānau-led innovation and the challenge of building system change capability simultaneously. So in this sense, I think of Niho Taniwha as a complexity-resilient knowledge system. Secondly, we've been able to think about Niho Taniwha as having its own mauri. You can go back to the next slide now, Ricky, if you like. Or life force. When we recognise that Niho Taniwha has its own mauri, then we attune to it rather than control it. We've been observing where Niho Taniwha locates itself and therefore where some of our collective system change efforts or opportunities are situated. And we're really grateful Niho Taniwha has landed in some way with all of you. Lastly, I want to return to the idea of hyperlocalised knowledge. Eruini shared with us that Taniwha are guardians of knowledge of local ecologies. I believe that the deep wisdom of this land is an antidote to the harm that's been caused through colonisation. And as our mates at Tōkana Te Raki say, and many others, we can't continue to import Western models to address inequities that have been caused by Western systems. In this sense, Niho Taniwha helps us to draw on mātauranga Māori to create system change for equitable outcomes for our whānau here in Aotearoa.
So I just want to start with this image here, which we use as a way, it's in many ways it looks complicated, but it's sort of a super simplified way of representing that kind of ecology view of our system, that there's lots of things that influence what happens for us in our own communities and for whānau in place. So there's lots of different levels of the system, and if you're working in government or wherever you are located in that system, we have different capacities to influence those conditions for whānau. What's been really important for us is to think about how that system connects into place, into actual people, into whenua, into whakapapa. And so this diagram attempts to kind of capture that complexity of the layers of the system that we're trying to influence, but the fact that it really matters when it comes to having your feet on the ground and the history and the context of actual place. So that's the little shorthand that we use to try and signal that. And I'm going to talk to 4 things that have been really exciting for us, or at least from my perspective, around what Niho Taniwha is enabling us to learn about and do together. So the first thing is that, so if Ricky Lee can flick to the next slide. The first thing is that it starts in place. So Ange talked about the 3D versions of this. So if you can see, I've got this little niho and we use these physically in the room when we're talking together and building it out. Niho Taniwha starts in place. So it recognises the tikanga, the values and the evidence that already exist in place, and different kinds of evidence that might show up depending on which rohi you are in and the perspectives and worldviews that you're bringing to it. And that means that rigour is also dependent on context in place. What matters here, what's right here, what's good is contextual, and we have to work together to make that explicit and have that as a shared understanding. And that also means that learning with communities and whānau and hapori locally is a primary source of evidence. It forms the evidence base. So that's the first thing that I love about Niho Taniwha. The second thing is that it allows the connection of learning from different sites and places and supports them to come together with other parts of the system to learn together and to inform action back into the system. So it becomes a collective learning process with different people from across the system. The third thing I love is that it helps to make visible the different roles we all have in enabling that change, whether we're partners, whether we're members of the community, whether we're whānau, whether we're working alongside whānau at regional or national level, we're all coming together to achieve a collective kaupapa. So that's the third thing. So next slide, Rikki, if you can. So everybody that's online here is somewhere in this shared kind of ecosystem. We're all playing a role somewhere within this, helping that learning to be up and down and across and supporting that process. And then the fourth thing that I love about it is that this is an approach for working together to learn what works for communities and to bring that change back into the system and to try and change the system accordingly. But even just attempting to work in this way, this relational way, which connects learning from across different places and different levels, means that we're operating differently in and of itself. So just adopting the mindsets of Niho Taniwha or similar kinds of learning approaches built on these kinds of knowledge systems already changes the system. And so these things are helping us do what you see here on the right-hand side, connect the worlds and learning and working with whānau in place and what's real in particular communities, and helping to connect that to different layers of policy and investment and decision-making in the system. These things are often really disconnected, and Niho Taniwha is providing a way for us to connect those things in a living system and form and bring it to life. So kia ora.
Thank you.